I snapped. The next thing I knew, I was halfway across the table with 2 handfuls of Glass's shirt. "Where are they?" I yelled. "Alex! Where are they?" It was a moment of pure adrenaline. If I could have split open his head for the information, I might have done it. "Get him out of here," Lindley shouted behind me. "This isn't going to bring back your son," I told him. "Give it up, Glass. For God's sake, don't let those kids die." I was still yelling as they pulled me out into the hall. The last thing I saw before they closed the door was Rodney Glass raising a hand my way to wave goodbye. Jesus, what had I just done? He'd gotten exactly what he wanted, hadn't he? I'd risen to the bait. Chapter 94. I was crouched down in the hall, trying to regroup, still angry but also embarrassed about what had happened with Glass, when I realized someone was standing over me. "Take a walk?" I looked up from a pair of black steel-toed boots to see Ned Mahoney holding out a hand. "How'd you know I was here?" I said. "After that little scene? I think everyone knows you're here," Ned said. Several other people had stopped and were still staring. "Come on, let's go breathe some air." "You didn't answer my question," I told him. "That's true," he said, and headed up the hall. So I stood and followed. We wound our way down to the ground floor of Liberty Crossing and out through the west lobby. The whole place is a huge X-shaped complex with one of those sterile concrete plazas in the crook of the 2 main wings. We stopped there and took a seat on one of the several empty benches overlooking the parking area down below. The dropping temperature outside didn't do much to cool me off while I told Ned what had happened. In fact, talking about it only made me feel worse. "I screwed up, Ned. Glass is probably going to be home in his own bed tonight while Ethan and Zoe—" I shook my head. I couldn't even finish. "That would have happened whether you went off the deep end with him or not," Ned told me. "You said so yourself. He's too clean, too smart." "Clean as dirt," I said. "God damn it! But I know we can get him." Mahoney was uncharacteristically slow to respond. Usually his brain has a direct line to his mouth. Then finally he said, "You're sure Glass is the one?" I nodded. "I'm sure." "And you can't prove it?" "I can prove it," I said. "Just not fast enough." "So maybe it's time to think about some alternatives," he said. I felt a chill down my back, and not because of the stiff breeze blowing up from the parking lot. I let Ned go on. "Listen, I'm a company man when I need to be one," he said. "If the system didn't work at least some of the time, I couldn't do this for a living. But guess what, Alex? It's not working. Not on this one. It's not even coming close to working." "Hard to disagree. Glass is unusual, smarter than most." I couldn't get Ned to look at me. He just stared down at the pebbled concrete between his feet while he talked. This was Langley, after all. You never knew which bush had eyes or which bench had ears. "Ned, you're talking about—" "I'm not talking about anything," he said. "But if I were, I'd tell you that I could pretty easily put my hands on some things you might need. Also that I wouldn't leave you hanging on this, if you're interested." I wanted to say, interested in what? But I was sure I already knew. Before I could say anything else, Ned got to his feet. "Go home, Alex. You got my number if you want to, talk." "Talk," I said. "Right. I do have your number." He hunched his shoulders against the wind and blew into his hands. "Should have worn a jacket out here," he said. "Cold as hell." Then he turned and walked away. Cold as hell for sure.
Chapter 95. Record.
After I left Cross, I was almost overwhelmed by my own emotion. I'd done it. I'd won. I'd beaten all of them, and I was still winning every single battle. Every one. And yet I felt a subtle change in myself. Was I so filled with guilt that I was someone different now? Why hadn't I struck out at Cross? The honest truth, I wasn't as impressed by him as I thought I might be. But was he playing me, setting me up for the kill? He was certainly physically imposing, and smart, I suppose. He's definitely passionate about what he's doing. But I don't believe he's going to catch me, to stop me, to put me away for what I've done. The awful things. I'm not afraid of Cross. But that's not what my feelings are about. This isn't about the detective. It's about me. I know that to be perfectly safe, I should do nothing about him. I'm clever enough to figure out something deadly. I'm good enough to execute it and get away with it. So why haven't I acted? What's stopping me? Is it guilt? Remorse over what I've done to the children? Maybe something got to me. Something about Cross's kids or his wife or Cross himself. His passion is inspiring. Or is it this? I know I can't stop myself and I want Cross to do it for me? No, I don't think so. I don't believe I want to be stopped. I've won. I rather like that.
Chapter 96. When I got home that night, I could hear the kids going at it down in the basement. Ever since Ava had come to stay with us, the three of them were getting on like a house on fire, and they'd turned the downstairs into their own makeshift all-in-one clubhouse, boxing gym, and movie theater. Bree and Nana were in the living room stuffing envelopes for Southeast Children's House. That was the name of the charter school Samson and Billy were still struggling to start up, without much help from me these days. I flopped down on the couch with my plate of leftovers and a Budweiser. "What's the good word?" Bree said, sliding me a sideways kiss, then another. She smelled good, felt even better. I'd missed her. "All bad," I finally told her. I couldn't get Mahoney's offer out of my head, but this was not the time or place to talk about it. I was home now. I reached down and picked up a tattered paperback copy of Precious, which someone had left on the floor. It was the movie tie-in version with the amazing lead actress Gabourey Sidibe on the cover. "Is Janny reading this for school?" I asked. "Tough story. Good one." "Actually, I got that for Ava," Nana said. "I told her she needed some meat and potatoes to go with those comic books she's been gobbling down." "Speaking of Ava," Bree said, "we got a call from Anita at Child and Family Services today, just checking in to see how things are going." "I guess that means they don't have a placement for her," I said, forking up a mouthful of meatloaf and sweet potato. "I think Anita's hoping they have one," Bree said. "She thinks Ava's going to make it." I looked up from my plate to see both of them staring at me. "Don't look so surprised, Alex," Nana said. "You knew they'd push for this." "Let them," I said. "We still need to get Ava into a real foster home before she gets too settled here, or too attached." Nana threw down the flyer and envelope she was holding. "Well, isn't that just typical?" "What?" I asked. "Apparently it's obvious to everyone but you that Ava is already attached to this family," she laid into me, "and most of us are attached to her." I set down my plate and rubbed my eyes. The last thing I needed right now was a lecture from my grandmother. Or a fight. I was home. "Nana, I can't tell you how bad the timing is. And Alex, I can't tell you how little I care what you think right now. Why do you suppose Ava never smiles at you?" she said. "Why do you think the conversation always drops off when you come into the room? It's because you're never here. You think she's that way with everyone?" "Excuse me, but I'm trying to help bring 2 kids home to their parents," I said, barely holding on to my temper. "Oh, yes, because nobody else is working on that one. Excuse me, but those Coyle children have thousands of people looking out for them right now. What does Ava have? She's got us, that's what." "That's not fair," I said. "Well, someone let me know when everything gets fair around here." She snatched the copy of Precious off my lap like she didn't even want me touching it and left the room. A second later, I heard the basement door open. "Who wants ice cream?" she called out like nothing had happened, and a small army of feet started up on the stairs. "I've got chunky monkey, mint chocolate chunk, cookie dough." I took a deep breath. Then I took another. "What a great day," I said. Bree gave me a sympathetic smile. I could tell whose side she was on, but she wasn't going to beat me up about this. Not right now, anyway. "Come on, tough guy," she said. "Let's go put some mint chocolate chunk on it. You deserve it." Chapter 97. Sleep was apparently out of the question that night. With Bree off working another graveyard shift, the bed seemed way too big, and I was left alone with my thoughts, including thoughts about poor Ava. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan and Zoe's dirty, emaciated faces, and every time I opened them, I thought about what Ned Mahoney had said to me after my encounter with Glass, or rather, everything he hadn't said. I could feel the idea of it taking shape like a heavy ball in my chest, half dread, half adrenaline. If I understood Ned correctly, we were talking about something I'd resisted ever since I became a cop, a line I'd never crossed. But then again, maybe that was only because I never had to. What if this was the one night, the hour, the minute that might make a difference for Ethan and Zoe? Could I live with that? And what if it was my own kids out there, I thought? Or Ava, for that matter? Would I even be lying here wondering what to do? Of course not. In a strange way, my fight with Nana only drove that point home. I would do almost anything to save those kids. Finally, just after midnight, I couldn't stare at the ceiling anymore. I sat up fast. In the dark, there are two things I always know how to find, my phone and my Glock. I reached for the phone, dialed Sampson's number. "Hello?" he answered in a thick voice. "Alex?" "Sorry to wake you," I said. "I need to talk, John. Actually, I need your help on something." "No prob, sugar." "Put on a pot of coffee. I'm coming over." "See you in a few." I threw on some clothes, splashed water on my face, and left the house. On the way to Sampson's, I called Ned Mahoney, too. He answered on the first ring. "I thought you might call," he said. Chapter 98. Sampson was on board the minute I told him what I wanted to do. He knew I couldn't ask outright, so he volunteered, and I was just desperate enough to accept. John is 6'9", with the kind of arms Michael Vick might wish for, plus he had exactly the skill set I needed to back me up. And Ned Mahoney had the tools. He was carrying a small messenger bag when we picked him up at the park and ride in North Fairlington. With 12 years on hostage and rescue, Ned was the break-in expert of our group. For the rest of the ride, he did most of the talking, planning. I just drove and listened. By 2:30 a.m., the three of us were huddled around the back door of Rodney Glass's condo in Alexandria. It was an attached duplex with a well-lit shared driveway in front, but a lawn and pool area in the back that was all dark and closed up for the night. I held a pen light for Ned while he unrolled a leather kit of picks and tension wrenches, each one in its own pocket. Usually Ned's all about the 40-pound battering ram, but he knows how to do small and quiet, too. Less than 10 seconds after he'd angled the first pick into the deadbolt, it turned with a soft click. The lock on the doorknob went even faster. I took point from there and led the way inside. It was dark and quiet on the first floor. We stopped there to pull the black balaclavas down over our faces. Honestly, it wasn't a good feeling. Seeing Ned and John in their masks really drove home for me what we were doing. This was nowhere I ever thought I'd be, but there was no turning back now. For that matter, I didn't want to. I wanted to save those kids if they were still alive. We went in a line up the hall to the front of the house. The stairs were carpeted and therefore no problem. It didn't take long before we were standing outside Glass's open bedroom door. I could hear him snoring and saw his outline, sleeping on his back with one arm thrown over his head. I signaled John to take one side of the bed. I hurried around and took the other. Mahoney stayed at the foot with his first syringe uncapped and ready. Then I counted it down for them on my fingers. 3, 2. All at once, Glass roared awake. He rolled toward me and reached for something under the mattress, but John was already there to pull his arm back. I stuck my hand into the same place and felt the contours of a pistol. He was an avid hunter, I knew, with several legally registered firearms in his name. I left the pistol where it was. As soon as Sampson had him, I tore off a length of duct tape and pressed it over Glass's mouth. Then I pushed him face down into the mattress while John slapped a pair of speed cuffs onto his wrists. Mahoney was next. He knelt on the bed, flipped back the covers, and jammed a needle into his hip. Glass tried to scream from behind the tape. Then his whole body went rigid like he was being tasered. The rush of adrenaline made him even harder to handle, but that didn't last long. Within a minute, his limbs started to go slack. Every sound he made got a little weaker until they ebbed into a kind of lazy, constant hum. He shuddered the way we sometimes do at the edge of sleep. He wasn't completely out, but he was completely useless for the time being. "That's it," Ned said. "We're good to go." We hustled him into some pants and down the stairs, holding him up, dragging his legs. At the door, I threw a jacket over his shoulders to hide the cuffs. Then we walked him out to the car in a tight group. As we took off, I had no doubt in my mind that ultimately we were doing the right thing. Rodney Glass knew where Ethan and Zoe